Welcome, welcome everyone. I'm speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. So let us know where you guys are from in the chat box so we can feel more connected even if we're on Zoom. All right. Punta Cana, hello, hello. Love it. All right, so I'll go over a few basic infos while we wait for everyone to come in. Just gonna tell you about two quick reminders that if you could keep your cameras off and your mics off so that we can ensure the best possible connection for everyone. And we're definitely gonna be taking questions throughout the conversation, so don't be shy. Put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them throughout the conversation rather than wait to get to the end, okay? So just another, let's see who else is here. Hola from Argentina, San Jose, Costa Rica. Amazing. Bienvenidos. Welcome, everyone. Oh. All right. So today we're going to talk to Mary Beth, an award-winning photographer that is originally from Texas and is currently based in Miami. And we're going to talk about her career from a design background to nomad experiences to her amazing personal projects, which is the title of our talk, which is from porn moms to David Beckham. You would think that those two things have nothing in common, but they do, and it's Mary Beth. So welcome, Mary Beth. Thank you so, so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad it's you, Paula.
Yes, for those of you who don't know, Mary Beth and I, we went to school. We missed each other by one quarter. So as I was going into Miami Ad School, she was graduating from Miami Ad School. And I have a very clear vision of seeing you because you were winning an award at school. And I was so scared and excited to start my photography career. And I saw you and it was so inspiring to see your work and who you were. And you were so nice to everyone. So yeah, it's always a pleasure. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself the best way that you know how, because I know you're a really funny person. So I'm going to let you take it from there and ask you to also sort of talk about your work already so that those of you that don't know you can sort of get a little bit more familiar with the kind of work that you do.
Okay. My name's Mary Beth, and I am a portrait photographer. I shoot for different magazines and brands, and it's always people related. And I've been doing this since I graduated from the ad school. And I remember going into the ad school with a design background and knowing I wanted to do photography. And I was always inspired by fashion magazines and would just look through W and Vogue and Vanity Fair even. That's and just be so inspired by the images that I saw in there and knew I wanted to do something similar, but didn't know how I would get from my cubicle at Hallmark to that direction. So, but I'm shooting for magazines now, not Vanity Fair and W, but some pretty cool ones. And I just
you have to check out your portfolio. You've done Billboard magazine, ESPN, Time magazine, which is huge. I kind of grew up on Time magazine as such a huge reference. It was the only international magazine that my parents used to subscribe to here in Brazil. So for me, it's like a huge deal.
Yeah, that was kind of a dream assignment when I got that call. I get nervous for every assignment. I don't know if that ever fades. I kind of hope it does, but it's kind of nice to have that like
adrenaline.
Right.
So you want to tell us about one of your pieces of work, maybe your one project, so that we kind of get an insight into your brain.
Okay. So again, I shoot for a bunch of different magazines and brands. Sometimes it's kind of more lifestyle work on the brand end of things a lot of times. And for magazines, all people, like, you know, from celebrities to musicians, and everyday people with amazing stories. So, you know, like the Time magazine shoot, it was a cover about mothers or women losing ground career-wise during the pandemic. And so I photographed a woman in Florida who lost her job wrongfully during the pandemic because she didn't have childcare. And stories like that just like are the best. You walk into a situation and you get to sit down with someone and just talk before taking out your camera and kind of get a sense of them, and then kind of almost collaborate together and decide how to visually represent the story. And so, usually shoots last maybe an hour to 2 hours. I was there for 4 hours. And I think just because it was so comfortable, and we had this lovely rapport, and I just really wanted this cover to be as powerful as this woman's story. So love stuff like that. But I think as far as I do a lot of personal work outside of my day-to-day, and these are ideas that I come up with that I've always wondered about or have been curious about, and I just write them down in a journal, like even the bad ones, and I'll just kind of go back, and the ones that I keep going back to are the ones that I tend to pursue. So a more recent one, I did a portrait series on porn moms, so women who are in the porn industry, and a lot of them have families and children, and what does that look like, and how do you balance those two worlds that are so completely
And you shot them with your kids rather than
with their
at
children
their jobs, let's say.
in their home, just like what does their everyday life look like. And so that's one story I did, and did a project on off-season Santa. So what do these men do outside of December? And during the pandemic, I did a portrait series on high school kids who were missing major milestones. So prom and Eagle Scout ceremonies and chess tournaments. And that those are the stories that just fill me up. So
yeah. And we're down. I have tons of questions for you about personal projects and how that kind of seeps into your commercial work or how they feed off of each other. But I want to go back a little bit to your experience as a designer, because you do have a really strong background in design, from college to working at Hallmark. It's just, I remember when I met you and you're like, I used to work at Hallmark. I'm like, I never met anyone who works there. That must be such a fun experience to do greeting cards and everything in the US and the UK. So can you tell me about that experience sort of prior to starting a photography career, what that transition was like? Because I think a lot of people do feel insecure about making big transitions like that, or what they feel is a big transition. So what was that moment for you? What made you see the possibility in that?
So it's funny because I remember I chose graphic design. I was always in the dark room in high school and college. And at 16, I remember being in the dark room, and I would have my parents drop me off late, or drop me off early and pick me up late so that I could spend more time in the dark room. And I knew, I'm like, time would pass and I wouldn't see it, or feel it passing. And I'm just like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I knew that at 16, but we kind of ignore these things because you choose how am I gonna make a living?
Safer choice.
I know. And I'm the youngest of 5. And so I have a lovely mother who would always tell my sister and I, we have 3 older brothers, that we should be teachers or nurses because it's a great career for a woman. And I'm like, okay. So
So even for you to be a designer was already kind of a big step.
Right. Like I was always creative, so that one made sense. But I worked for Hallmark right out of school, designing greeting cards, and that company it's amazing. Like they're really good at nurturing their creatives, and they get people from the coast into Kansas City, and they manage to keep them their whole career because it's a cushy job and it feels like a family. Like it's a very lovely company. So I did that for about 2.5 years in Kansas City, and then moved over to Northern England for 2 years and worked for Hallmark. It's their international headquarters in Northern England. So did that for 2, and I had a blog that kind of got some traction, and I
With
would
your
just kind of,
photography?
with photography, but I would also kind of write about like the funny things that would happen just culturally, you know, that as an American coming in, like, okay, this is hilarious and no one else like gets it or sees it. So I just write about it. So had a good little following, but a lot of people would always comment on my photography, and I'm like, why am I not doing this? What I've always wanted to do. And so that's when I decided to go to Miami Ad School and pursue what I knew I always wanted to do.
How old were you when you started?
I was 29.
Yeah. I started at 27 too. It felt for a moment there, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm almost 30. It's crazy, but you know, it's so worth it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of that, then about your design background, what do you see? Because I mean, I personally, I mean, and a lot of people love your lighting and your composition. Like for me, those are the strongest things on top of your storytelling. Like you always have lighting that's a little bit different, or a composition, for example, the athletes that you shoot, like the way that you position their bodies and stuff, it just seems like there's a design mind working behind it. Is that true, or is that me just projecting what I know about you? So what do
Right.
you see in terms of design that kind of feeds your work, and
I
what
think,
does design represent to you nowadays, if anything?
right. I think everything. It influences every decision you make. You know, you think about how things are going to look in a layout, and how would this work on a double spread? You know, where am I going to position someone so the middle is not right in the middle of their head? And just kind of getting all different options, and also color composition. It all matters, you know? So my design background has influenced my photography a lot. And I'm so glad I chose that route, because I think I would have gotten more of an education being a photojournalist at Texas Tech, the undergrad school I went to, which is great. Like, love photojournalism. But you know, you also learn on all film, and by the time I went back to Miami Ad School, everything was different. So having that design piece in my back pocket, I think, was so helpful.
Yeah, I remember being at an internship in New York, and I was interning for a photographer, and he would finish shooting a look and then he would just sit down right away and lay it out already. And I had never seen that before, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, yeah, I do have to think about sort of the end product already when I'm planning the shoot. Whereas when I started school, it was just, I want to shoot what I want to shoot, you know?
Right. Which is fun. You know, it's fun to
Yeah.
do both.
It's, yeah, exactly. There's moments to do that, and then there's moments to visualize the end product and then kind of bring it back and
Mhm.
make it happen.
And I think even more so, like, you know, when you're doing like a commercial job and interacting with art directors and copywriters, like having come from that world and understanding it and being able to like collaborate. I love collaborating, you know. The job can be so lonely sometimes, you know. The only time I'm around people is on the actual
Yeah,
shoot.
I think that's really cool for you to expand on just a little bit how the photographer's job is a bit lonely, right? Because you're editing, you're planning a lot on your own.
Mm-hmm. That's why I always have visitors over, because I'm just like, people, let's talk. um, but yeah, you know, anytime you hop on a Zoom call to discuss a project, like, I want to hear from the art directors. I want to hear their ideas. And, you know, I think when I shoot either for a magazine or a brand, like, I think like a designer. So, you know, I used to shoot for Southwest Airlines magazine, and it's a very like family friendly, bright, playful, colorful magazine. And so I almost shoot for that brand specifically, the stories that I work on. And same with, you know, I just did a shoot for a new brand. It's called Champs and Heroes, and sandwiches named after sports heroes and champagne. And I told him before, I was like, I'm not a food shooter, you know, like, and they're like, no, we want it like, it's all people and it real messy and edgy. And it was a 1-day shoot, and they just let me play, you know. So I was telling the guy, I'm like, lick the sandwich, like, you know, just like ridiculous off, you know, throw this at my face, and I kind of lit it differently. It's really, you know, just strobe flash. So it's fun to work with a brand in mind and kind of create a visual language for them and with them. So.
And really tell that story. Yeah, I remember when we met, Ginny, who was our mutual photography teacher, would say, you know, Mary Beth, she really knows how to talk to people, and she really knows how to get stories out of people in such a natural way. So I think that's really cool, because for me, photography is so much about storytelling in whatever field it is.
Right.
And speaking of food photography, because you mentioned, oh, I'm not a food photographer, but my next question was, I wanted you to talk about your internships, because you did really, really cool internships, and that's really sort of the international aspect of the school that I think is so cool to highlight. So one of your internships was in Miami with a very famous food photographer who's Sid. Yeah. You also interned in Norway, and you interned in LA with Joe Pugliese, or Joe Pug. Can you tell us about this crazy experience of living, you know, in so many different countries, interning for such different photographers? How was that like for you?
I mean, that's how you learn, you know, just by observing and watching how people interact with other people and light things. And so with Sid, you know, Sid's one of my dear friends still. I call him my uncle. He's just a total lunatic in the best way possible. But he's taught me so much about the business of photography. You know, you go into school and you develop your creative eye and sense, but the business side of things, how am I going to make a living doing this? And how does this work? You know? So he really guided me throughout the years. Even after I was in school, I'd just pick his brain. Hey, Sid, I need help on this. How do you do an estimate? You know, just things like that you don't really learn. And with Joe, you know, his work is insane. And I just think he has such a crazy, beautiful eye and sense for color and lighting. And on top of that, he's just like a lovely human being, you know, and being on set with him, it was like, it was never about him, you know? And I loved that. And I think I took a lot of that from him. You kind of go in and, I don't know, just being able to sense the mood and,
because you can set the mood. It's like you're the director then of the shoot. Do you feel that? Or
yeah, I feel like the subject sets the mood, and you kind of get a sense for, you know, I think you're always looking for a connection, you know, whether you're doing video or design or you know, with a client, or photography, like you're always looking for that connection with a subject, and you don't always get it. So when you do, when there is like openness, because it is so much a collaboration between two people, like you need it, and the work suffers when it's not there. So, but when there's that like little, all you need is a little bit of warmth and a little bit of like rapport to kind of walk away being like, that was awesome, you know, and just to walk out feeling good. And most of the time it happens. Like most people are lovely, you know. I've only had a tiny handful of
not so great experiences.
Yeah, just kind of where you walk away like, well, glad we're in the car. So
how do you cultivate that sort of on set?
Man,
because I think it's really natural for you. That's why I think it's like some people do need to work on it. Like they're not there yet, and they need to kind of learn techniques and tools to kind of get to that place of warmth. Right. And others are just born with it, and you're like, God, you just have this, you know?
Right. You can't force it. So I never try. But you know, just kind of I don't do a lot of small talk. I don't try to, but just, I don't know, maybe just in the way that you direct someone and throw out, like I photographed Wayne Gretzky for masterclass, and he's very like professional, and it was very, okay, stills, all right, next, that kind of situation. So I had 2 days with him, and the second day I had a bit more time in this one setup, and I loved this setup. They didn't use any of those photos, but that's okay. And I can't either. Heartbreaking. So, but I had time with them, and I have my camera in front of my face, and I said, Mr. Gretzky, I grew up in Texas playing roller hockey in the back alley, and I always had Wayne Gretzky skates, and I loved those things. And, so got a chuckle out of them. And that was that. Like, that was really all the personal stuff I said outside of directing.
Mm-hmm.
And so last set comes, and I have 15 more minutes with them, and they were setting up the last video set. And so they're like, Mr. Gretzky, stills, we've got stills on set. And he's like, stills again? And I just started laughing, and I'm like, you're so over us. And he started laughing. And I was like, I just need 5 minutes. Let's just get some good ones on set, and then we're good. We got so many good ones. And so I photographed them, and they weren't quite ready for him on the last set. So I said, why don't you come take a look at the images from the last set? They're really beautiful. And so he was scrolling through, or before we wrapped, he goes, skater girl, get up here. I want a photo with you. And I was like, oh, so nice. Cause I would have never asked for that, and so he was looking through the images, and he looked back at me, and he was like, you're a really good photographer. I was like, thank you. I'm
One of
just
those
thinking, like, I'm never going to forget this. It was so special. And so generous of him to get me up there with a picture of him. And he got one with my assistant and the guy who was interviewing him. Just those little moments of warmth that just, like, we all walked away giddy. It's like, that was so awesome. What a guy,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What about your internship in Norway?
Anytime you have the opportunity to go in an environment that's not familiar, or comfortable necessarily, just visually different, do it. Just say yes, and find a piece of who you are everywhere in the world. And you kind of come to realize, like, I can make a home anywhere. It's all about the people who I surround myself with.
Mm-hmm.
And in Norway, the people are just so sweet, and gorgeous, and kind, and so that was an amazing experience. And Nancy's been over there for years. She's an American photographer who shot Prince back in the day, like when he was on his Purple Rain tour. So she's had quite a career, and now she's over there, and she kind of shoots everything. She focuses a lot on food and people. But I admire her for just kind of running the whole gamut of photography and not sticking to, like, a particular, like, I photograph people. She just kind of does it all and has fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, because that's one of those things too. It's in photography we get, and also in the advertising industry too. I've heard people say, we get so many different kinds of advice, like specialize in this, or no, be good at everything, or. But at the end of the day, I guess you kind of have to do what makes sense for you.
Yeah. Do what you're interested in. And I think, that's why I can't wait to talk about personal projects, just because I think it's so important, and it's fun,
Now I have another question about your internships.
Okay.
Did you have any sort of disaster stories from one of your sets where, like, you majorly screwed up on set as an intern?
Yeah.
Because this happens so much. I dropped a light once that I thought was going to kill someone. I was mortified. I was, like, embarrassed for a week after that.
Yeah. Yes. I remember Joe was shooting for, like, Fortune magazine or something, and he was so generous to have me on these big shoots. And I probably made him cringe more than once. But there was another shoot going on and he asked me to do something and I thought he said move that light, and it was a light for the other set, and I'm like going to move it and he's like no, and I'm just like, oh my god, what a bonehead, but who cares, whatever. It's one of those things you're like, you learn from these experiences. And
Definitely.
sometimes I think back on that sometimes and I'm like still embarrassed by it. I'm like, all right, let that one go. You're fine. It's been
yeah, it doesn't go away. I think about certain things too, and it just pops up randomly, like boop. I'm like, oh my god, remember when I did that? Gee,
I know. I know. But
in the end, it balances itself out, and like you said,
it's how we learn. It's a part of the process, and yeah.
Gotta embrace it.
I know.
So I wanted to ask you too about collabs, and we've kind of been talking about it in different ways right now. How has this relationship been? Because you need your assistants and you need people to collaborate with, and if you visit your website, you can see also that there's a lot of copy. So you tell people's stories as well, which kind of goes back to what you used to do at the blog a little bit, starting to tell stories at the time whilst living in the UK. So how has this process of collaboration been for you? What do you think is important? Any advice or sort of like, no, don't do this, don't, what to avoid?
Oh my gosh. Well, I am not an expert in anything, so I always hesitate to give advice. But I think collaboration's huge. For me, I love working with other people. It like gives me life. So, one, on set, the people who you choose to surround yourself with, kind of think about it as a friendship or a relationship. It's a professional relationship, of course, but everyone wants to work with people who are fun and who are delightful to be around, and professional and on time and, all these other important things. But my main assistant that I work with, Javier Sanchez, I was on a commercial shoot for Humana. This was years ago. And I didn't know Javier. The production company hired him as a digi. And after that shoot, I was like, I never want to work with anyone else. Like my files were so organized, and he is just a delightful human being, like so professional and fun to be around. We'll like go on road trips up to Boca on a regular for ESPN for these.
Yeah, photography, so many long hours too. So many hours on set.
And I just like being around him. And I think he feels the same about me. It's like, we're a good team, and I'm like, I feel like I have a coworker in him. So yeah, it matters who you surround yourself with. And I've had some assistants who, aren't quite a good fit, and are a little more of a distraction. And it's important to kind of, and I'm talking all crew, like just kind of, you walk into these situations, and I hate to say, I tell people, I'm like, I'm the help. Like I go in, I'm in to do a job, and I'm not there to small talk or chit chat or make friends. Like, you want to make the experience as easy and pleasurable as possible for people.
Right.
So I try to have everything set up to where we can move people through really quickly and respect their time and have fun, So,
and have you felt that as you move up, also you have less and less time with your subjects, because over the recent years you've been shooting more and more famous people. I'm assuming they have less time in general than
sometimes you're lucky. I mean, David Beckham, for instance, I think I had 15 minutes with them. So that setup time, I think we got there 3 hours in advance. The setup time is huge. And so, but I did a cover for ESPN, and it was Juan Soto. He's a a player for the Nationals. And I had 2 hours with him for the cover shoot. And I'm like, this is so great. I felt like I was in photo school again. I was like, we just get to play. And he looked amazing and the lighting was amazing and the location was amazing. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Okay. And there were so many things that I didn't plan for that we just had time to do. So for a shoot like that, I think they picked 18 selects to be retouched with, which I'm like, I've never had that happen, for a commercial shoot, yes, but never for a magazine shoot. So it's really fun. And then what else were you talking about? You asked about like crew and
yeah, collabs. Any advice or any tips, if any? Yeah,
So I also work with a writer on my personal projects. So she happens to be my best friend and she happens to be crazy talented. But she's an incredible writer and is always just so generous with her time to collaborate with me on these. And, I always kind of, if we're able to get things published, because these personal projects, like, it's never a money maker for me. Like, I maybe make, whatever, but I'm traveling around all over. But so we just kind of work together on that. And I love working with her. It's just the best, to be able to put words to an image that make it so much stronger than it is alone.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love about that is that it really gives like more voice to the person that you're portraying. So on top of the pictures and the visual story that you're telling, you also get to tell that person's story almost from their perspective as if they're telling it. And I just love that. I think we need that so much. I'm just going to do a quick reminder for everyone who came in the call after. If you guys have any questions, you can put it in the chat because a few people came in like 5-10 minutes later. So any questions about photography, career, internship, whatever, definitely put it in the chat and we'll get to you guys. All right. So now I want to ask you about how much, well, I think we might have a question. All right. 3 questions. Let's go. All right. So Lilia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. She's so thankful for your talk because even though she's pursuing an art director career now, while having a graphic design BA, her biggest passion is photography and videography. So I have many questions. All right. 1, how much do you edit the photos you take and any tips you consider the most important when editing?
Okay. That's a good question. I used to show people because I'm like, okay, here was the raw image and here's what I did. It's very like subtle, I think lighting is huge. So you get the lighting right because you can't really recreate that in post, or you can, but I don't want to do that. I do very little retouching. Just, little face stuff. On the celebrity shoots, I use a retoucher, so they do it. But you get the images back and it's just like, it's super subtle. You don't want it to look weird. There's so much like over editing being done. And also with your design background, I'm sure you're really good in Photoshop. And so I do like kind of do shifts in colors and tones and, so I think that's what kind of creates that like consistency. And it's not always the same for every shoot. Like I tweak it just based on what feels right for each shoot. But it's fun to play with color because what looks good, what feels good. And you have a lot of control over that. But you kind of keep it. There's like this fine line of going too far. It's like plastic surgery. Like once it crosses the line, it's like
you see it.
Yeah, exactly.
You see it right away.
Yeah, you don't want to go that far.
But you've over the years, like now, do you think you see it faster, or have you sort of always seen it because you already had that design background, the same as Lilia?
Yeah, I try to do it on set. Like we're shooting in capture, or you could do it in Lightroom, whatever you choose to use. But I'll play with the settings before the talent comes on set and be like, okay, this looks nice. I'm happy with this. And then my post work is like so subtle. I just send them.
Yeah, for whoever sees your Instagram, you do have a highlight where you show your test shoots. So you do a lot of that work pre-shoot.
Right.
To really test it.
Right.
Cool. Second question from Lilia is, could you talk a bit about your Billboard photo shoots?
Yeah. So that is one client. I remember working with Joe, and I was always like, God, these are so freaking fun. Like, he just gets to do whatever he wants to do. And you have this amazing talent walk on set. They're usually dressed in something amazing. The location's great. So you have all these elements to kind of create this story, visual story. I say visual story. So with those shoots, I didn't know, that was always like a dream client of mine. So I remember when they called me for the first time, I'm just like, okay, what am I going to do? But they really give you so much creative freedom. So I just play, and I do research on the person beforehand and kind of get a sense of who they are and their music, and try to create a look that feels consistent with that. And with those, I've got more crew, I've got lighting, like it's more of a production than a lot of the shoots that I do. So.
And then as far as sort of Billboard's visual identity, did you see that as well before?
Yes.
Kind of like the Southwest example?
Totally.
Kind of had a vision.
Billboard has a look, and I did a lot of research, who shoots for them, just kind of looking at the work that they've done for them, and looking at the magazine, through the magazine, and it's a certain look and feel, and so you try to make things consistent with that. So I feel really lucky to have them as a client, because it's one of my favorites. The shoots are fun.
Great. What equipment are you using mostly for your shoots currently?
So since I was 16, I shoot with a Canon. So I've got 2 Mark IVs with different lenses, and I use Photo lighting. So with all types of modifiers, I just kind of play with different modifiers. I do use a lot of Photech soft lighters. They're beautiful. And then I love a grid, like direct lighting. I love playing with color. So I try to use gels. Sometimes it gets too jelly, and I'm not a fan of that. So yeah, just subtle little,
touches of color and light.
Yeah, little, yeah.
Thomas wants to know if you use any diffusion filter, and what is your favorite focal length?
Oh, that's
I love these super technical.
Yeah, question. What kind of camera do you use? I'm kidding. So I'm obsessed with my 50. I always want to shoot with my 50 millimeter, and Javier is always like, no, use the 24 to 70 on this. And I'm like, no, I want to do the 50. I'll just pull back more. So I always gravitate toward that. And what else? Diffusion. I do. I like on the lighting, like just, I use diffusers on light. It's just that soft, yummy light that's really beautiful and nice. I don't do a lot where it's like, beauty dish, a lot of times I'll put the diffuser over the beauty dish just to make it softer, but it's fun to play. You don't want all your work to look exactly the same. And I think it's easy to do that. You get comfortable with, you're like, oh, this is beautiful. And so you do it the next time and the next time. And it's like, no, just change it up and try to do things differently,
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. Lilia wants to know, she sent another question. She wants to know about film photography. So I guess, do you still shoot in film?
I don't. I miss it. I loved being in the darkroom. Like, there's nothing like it, but it just doesn't make sense for me. Like, time-wise, digital's so great. I have a ton of film cameras over here that I would love to play with, like on a vacation or something. But I think just because of time constraints, I just shoot digital. So.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
let's get into your personal projects now.
Okay.
How has that been over the years? Because you've done so many personal projects that I guess from this end, from those of us who are watching from the outside, they've been very successful. They've been award winning. So how has that been? How has that tension been between personal interests, projects, professional assignments? Do they feed each other? Describe that relationship for us.
Yes. Okay. So, there's no right or wrong way to do things. I think I like to feel into what feels good for me. And I think getting into photography, I didn't have any work starting off, I was shooting for small businesses in town and just everyday people just doing little things and struggling to pay my rent. um, and so these personal projects I would just do because, I had an idea and I really, and that's the work I would put out there. I wouldn't put events that I was getting paid for, like, because I don't want to be hired to do weddings or photograph families, so I think it's important to be really mindful of what you put out there, because if you do it well, you're going to get hired for it, and then you're going to kind of get pigeonholed in this area that you might not want to be in. So I knew I wanted to shoot for magazines and I wanted to photograph people, and so I would go and do these personal projects on my own. And as I've kind of gotten into my career a little bit, I've really noticed, like, wow, this is so wonderful, because I don't have to do any like weird email promos or like knock on people's doors or send postcards with a lifestyle image from a random, commercial shoot that I could potentially get hired for something similar in the future. I just put out new work, like work that I'm interested in, and you kind of hope that other people might be interested. Who cares if they're not? Like, I think this is an interesting topic, so let's just put that out there. And I don't know, just being able to share new work as a way of marketing yourself. It doesn't feel pushy. It doesn't feel promoty. It's like this really
It's
natural.
organic.
Yeah, and I love it. And so that's kind of what I've done. It's like a system that's kind of worked for me. And that's how I got some of my first magazine job. I did a series called Miami Boyfriends, and it was all old men in Miami who would I started doing it because, this old man was walking down the street. He's like with a cane, like almost 90. And then I'm like, oh, he reminds me of my grandpa. He's so cute. And then I'd get close to him.
And they're so stylish in Miami too.
Yeah.
You see these older people that are very sort of eccentric in a really great way. So
yeah, so cute. And I remember passing him and he was like, hey, mommy, and wolf whistled at me, and I'm like, what the hell? So anyway, I kind of found a new love for these people. I'm like, okay, they're harmless, and I would end up photographing them. So Miami Boyfriends was my first project. And then I had a girlfriend who was a design major with me at Texas Tech, and she worked at Southwest Airlines magazine. And she goes, MB, I have the perfect project for you. I have a Rod Stewart impersonator called Hot Rod, and I want him photographed. I just want you to make him look like a rock star and a badass. And so that was my first magazine assignment, and it was supposed to be like a little 2-pager, and it ended up being the cover because they loved the images so much. So that really was like the first job that kind of got me on the magazine path that I'm super grateful for.
And so currently, how do you deal then with the personal and the commercial? You still try to balance them as much as possible?
Mm-hmm. So I try to do at least one personal project a year.
Cool.
So I'm really excited about my next one, like in the nerdiest way.
Which I'm assuming you can't talk about yet.
I think I can talk about it, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I know. So yeah, I'm working on a story called Something in Our Skies. and I'm partnering with a guy who has a blog or a podcast called That, and it's all about people who've had UFO encounters.
That sounds so exciting.
Oh my God. I love it. I'm obsessed with UFOs lately. Like I can't stop watching documentaries. I can't stop reading things, like obsessed in not a healthy way. So I had the nerdiest conversation with him yesterday and I was just like giddy all day.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see how that would trend. The first thing I thought was like lighting. Oh my God, how's she gonna light this? You know, this is gonna be so cool.
Yeah.
We have a few more questions here. So what do you recommend for a photography portfolio?
Online. I'm assuming online. I just use Squarespace.
Mm-hmm.
I think because it's so intuitive and I'm able to go in and switch everything up. I'm always tempted to work with like amazing web designers. Like there's one online that I follow and I'm just like, oh, love her work. But I just, you know, it's a huge investment. And I'm like, you gotta keep adding things. And I don't know. I just question whether or not that's necessary, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I think something you mentioned before is really great advice for that. You said something about, you know, not putting out work that you don't want to be hired for.
Yes.
And a lot of times we do see that in portfolios. You'll put out a picture or project because it looks really good or because maybe it was successful. And then you put it on your portfolio, but it's not what you want to keep on shooting. So right. I think that's one like great piece of advice, to just let things go sometimes. Like, okay, this is not going on my portfolio and it's okay.
Right. Or this is a cover. I like it, but I don't love it. So I'm not going to put it on my website. And yeah, put things on Behance. You're in school, you know, or new in the industry, like use Behance as almost like an online visual, like, okay, here's where I'm at work-wise, just for you to see. And I remember I put off-season Santas. I try to update my Behance. It's kind of behind, but whatever. But the off-season Santas were on there and it just went crazy on Behance and like views and comments. And I'm like, it's crazy. You never know what can kind of take off in certain realms. But I think Behance is such a awesome place to go for inspiration and just to kind of see what people are doing and to put up your own work.
Yeah, I don't know where Lilia is speaking from, but I know, I'm not sure how big Behance is in Latin America. I might be completely wrong and it's huge and I'm just completely out of the loop.
Right.
But here I see a lot of photographers just like on Instagram, trying to promote their work on Instagram. And that's what I see the most. But like I said, I might be completely out of it. And
right. Photo editors always go to your Instagram, probably even before they go to your website. So just kind of keep updated, put new stuff out there.
Yeah, and play.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to ask you, you've kind of answered this before, but what is your process in terms of, because you talked a little bit about your process about doing research for commercial clients and what you do, you research the magazine and their look, and then you talk to them and you do the pre-shoots. When it comes to personal projects, is that very different? How do you go about your process of creating that personal project?
Well, first, like look-wise, right? Or idea.
Look-wise, or even idea-wise, you mentioned before, which I thought was really interesting, that you write down all your ideas, even the bad ones, and then the one you keep going back to is the one you pursue. So if there's, sorry?
Can I read you some of these personal project ideas?
Sure.
Okay. Just to like, I love the process of brainstorming. Because, you know, I've got, so I dated a guy who went to, like, he got into jazz later in life, and he would go to this band camp, this adult band camp in New Orleans. And we were on a date, and there was a couple that we were talking to, and it was raining outside, and we were like, oh, just join us. And so he was telling stories about band camp, and he was like, and this one time I go, at band camp. I don't know, it was just so funny. But what an amazing story, right? Like it's mostly older men, which I love. And they wear the whole like marching get up and go, like, anyway, a story on adult band camp. I love that. And then there's like a place called Hollywood, Ireland. The Afterlife, Ex Mafia. Always expecting. These are people who have like 8 kids. Like my friend was in a pregnancy group on Facebook and she's like, there's people who have like 16 kids. They just keep having kids. I'm like, oh, it's a story. People, cruisers. I hate cruises. There's people who have like, they get points for going on so many cruises. And
oh yeah, it's a platinum membership status.
Yeah, so there's like a whole crazy long list, and reading back on these, they just make me laugh. I'm like, it's a terrible idea.
But then some of them might come back. Yeah,
for sure. So you get these ideas like when you're in the shower or random times throughout the day, and just keep a notebook and write stuff down, because I think sometimes it's so inspiring to look back and helpful, when you feel like you're out of ideas. And
and then technically speaking, in terms of personal projects,
mm-hmm.
Are you able to have a little bit more time to plan those shoots, or because maybe you're not really getting paid for it at first, it's on your own time, you're
right.
sort of as like on schedule as you are with the commercial shoots?
Right. So I kind of just go into it, and I think the first one almost creates the visual language for the rest.
Cool.
And fortunately with subjects like this, they're usually excited to be a part and to share their story. So you can kind of play a little bit more, like you don't have those time limitations that you do on normal shoots. But going into something like this, like with the UFO encounters, like I would love to photograph people where they actually had the UFO encounter and kind of looking up at the sky. Maybe it's at dusk, and maybe it's a little lit from above, or I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I don't do any like compositing in my images, but I think for this one, I might, just to kind of get some stars in the sky, or, I don't know yet, but I'll know.
I think it's cool that, it's important. I think it's important in the creative process to not put limits, because it's like, okay, just because you haven't done compositing in the past doesn't mean that for this project, it's not relevant and it's going to add to the story. And it doesn't mean you're going to become a composite photographer,
I hate the tripod. That's the piece of equipment I hate the most. You're just like,
I always preferred the monopod. If I had to, I love the monopod. Is so easy. It's like, it's smaller. Just put it on my backpack. Let's go.
Yeah, it's friendly. It's like drinking coffee. Coffee's a friendly drink. The monopod is a friendly piece of
friendly equipment. So we're actually in our last few minutes. So we're going to head into the practical part. I mean, even though I think we already got so many cool pieces of information from you, but I wanted to kind of talk about 2 aspects of your career. And if you could give practical advice that people can implement into their own careers. I'm excited for some of these. So the first aspect is how to get steady freelance work in the photography business. Because, for us watching you work, it seems as if you've sort of been able to have, that client that keeps hiring you again and again and again. And that's so important when it comes to being a freelancer and paying your rent and paying your bills and stuff. So any advice on that?
I think about this quite a bit, because I'm like, I don't think I could live on my magazine photography clients alone. So I think don't not pay attention to all your clients, even the jobs that maybe don't pay as much. I have a client that I shoot for probably 4 or 5 times a week. Compass, it's a real estate company. So I do these lifestyle shoots for their agents. And it's not a big money maker each shoot, but I have 2-hour lifestyle shoots with their agents, agents that have been there forever, new agents coming in, repeat, whatever. I shoot for them all the time. And I value that client so much. I love working with them. I look forward to like seeing, I'm like, oh, I haven't been with this agent for a year and I can't wait to see them. And it probably makes up a third of my income. Like it's huge.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So you get situations like that. And early on when they approached me, I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. You know, that was my initial thought. And then kind of getting into it more, I'm like, this is the best. Because there's not a lot of consistency in the freelance world. And I've found it through them. And I love it. You know, I'm going to Dallas in 2 weeks to visit family. And I reached out to the marketing person there. And so she's booking shoots for me when I'm out there. And in New York, I do the same thing. I've kind of shot for them in a bunch of different cities because they're kind of all over now. But I mean, I'm telling you, that's like my number one client. Love working with them. And I feel really lucky to have that relationship. And, you know, that's a whole other aspect, just like nurturing those relationships and being easy and flexible. And, you know, if they cancel the night before, I'm not going to charge them a cancellation fee. They give me so much business. Like, it's okay. We'll just rebook some other time, you know?
Right. That makes sense. Cause you know, it's going to come in anyway. And
right. It's good to be flexible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, small clients, don't underestimate, what that can become.
I think you really made it your own. I've seen those images on Instagram and you really gave them
now.
an identity, you know?
It's their brand, you know, and you look at their photography kind of all over the country and it feels pretty consistent.
Yeah.
But I do most of those shoots in South Florida and it's really, it's fun.
Any big no-nos when it comes to freelance work in terms of, you know, say no to this, like, don't, you know, I know a lot of photographers do get offered work for free, like, oh, come in and we'll trade this for that or something. Any thoughts on that before we move on to the last question?
You know, I think photography design, it's a nice bartering job, you know? So if you're able to barter with someone where it makes sense for you and for them, do it, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think an exchange is important. Like there has to be some type of exchange. You're doing work, you know, even if it's something small, it's like, it just kind of shows like, I value you, you value me. And I did a lot of free work early on. And for me, it was like just that time to kind of build confidence where I was a little uncertain of where I was at. And then once you feel confident, it's like, okay, now I can start charging people for my work and feeling okay about it, you know?
Right. And kind of standing up for yourself, like, okay, no, I'm going to charge this much and this is it. And
right. Right. So just out of school, you know, you don't need to charge $2,000 for a shoot because you might not be there yet, you know, and that might put too much pressure on you to perform, you know? So just say, look, I'd love to do this for you. I'll give you a rate of $500. And if you end up really loving it and using the images, we can decide on, you know, an additional fee
in the future or
right. Just kind of using that sense of like, this feels right, you know?
Yeah. Amazing. So now for the last sort of set of advice is if you can talk a little bit about how to make a personal project shine, how to sort of further its impact on your career, whether it's commercial or for exposure awards, because I think you particularly have been so good at that, at having all your personal work sort of either get awarded or published or.
I think pulling it together to where it feels like it's a package, you know, Like I have the writing, I've got the images, I have video interviews, you know, that a lot of times they never see the light of day, but it's kind of a nice additional thing to have. That's where I kind of transcribe, and then we'll give the writer that transcription to kind of to write the story. But you know, I was telling someone about this the other day. Initially, I used to pitch the idea before I would do the work, like say to a magazine or something. And then the magazine kind of wants to make it their own and will give you creative direction. And that happened with Southwest and the off-season Santas. So I kind of pitched it to them early on after I did maybe 2. And they were like, oh, it's really moody and we want something brighter. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this one. Like, I'm just going to do it how I think. And then you can decide afterwards. And I'm like, don't give up that not control, because that sounds a bit aggressive, but you know, just do it for you. You know, don't think about where it's going to land. And if it's a strong story, it'll land somewhere. Someone will pick it up for sure. But make it really easy. You know, I'm making it really easy for them to say yes. You know, if they were hiring me to do a shoot like this, you know, you have to pay for flights. Like no one's going to say yes to that these days, you know. I don't know.
Right. So even approaching people to pitch your work seems like it's super important too. I didn't really think about it before in that way. It's not just putting your work on your website. It's like, hey, I did this. Take a look. What do you think?
And I actually have, there's a company called Wonderful Machine, and I have them pitch these stories after I'm done for me. So they charge a fee. It's nothing crazy. I think it's like $600, and they'll reach out to all the photo editors. Hey, here's a story on Are you interested? And they'll get yes or no's and like update me. And so it's not coming from me. Again, that feels really natural and comfortable. And it's always, you know, a lot of times I have, you know, if it goes in like the Huffington Post or other online things, you don't get paid for it, but you get eyeballs on it. And that's always my intention. Like, I just want as many eyeballs to see the story as possible. You know?
Because you're the personal product. It's important to you. It's personal. Right. Oh, so this time has flown.
I know. I miss you.
Our hour has just flown by. So I really, really want to thank you for being here and sharing information about your work, about your process, about your life, about finances. I think it was so sort of like open and authentic and honest. And I think that's what we really need in the creative industry too, to kind of really see the real deal and not glamorize stuff too much. But I just really want to thank you so much. Thank you everyone for sticking around. And be super accessible if anybody wants to take a look at her work, reach out to her on Instagram. I know she's super friendly and just always sort of open to everyone. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, MB. It was such a pleasure.
Bye guys. Thanks. I wish I could see everyone's faces, you know?
I know. We're getting in thanks here in the chat.
Cute.
Thank you so much, guys. Good night.